Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, folks. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. It is April 15th, Tax Day 2015, and on the show today we will be having Athen Chimenti. I'm sure that's how his name is pronounced. I believe this is him in the queue here, area code 502. If I did pronounce your name incorrectly, you'll let me know when you come on the show. I do appreciate you contacting me with a request that you come on my show. It's been a while since I had a astrology expert on my show. I believe the only one I had since I started this show in November 2013. The only one I've had since was Jim Delacoli, who's best known for all those interviews he did on In5D Radio. But Athen, thank you for contacting me. I'll ask you a lot of astrology-specific questions and such, and also that stuff about why you check a card and everything. I've seen some of your videos and on YouTube in preparation for this interview, and I noticed that after you do like a horoscope, you do check a tarot card. I'll ask you about that too later in the interview, so just keep that in mind. But first, by the way, his website is masteringthezodiac.com if anybody wants to check it out. And I'll start first with the news, and before I get to the news courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars, I want to say a couple things about tax day. Taxes, income tax, is voluntary. But how can taxes be voluntary if you go to jail for not paying them? Well, we're letting them use force against us and take us into jail and charging us with crimes that we did not commit. How exactly does the scam work? Well, first of all, the IRS is a privately owned Puerto Rican trust fund. Puerto Rico Trust Fund number 62, to be precise. Thank you, Alex Collier, for saying that in one of your presentations in the mid-'90s. He did point that out, that the IRS is a privately owned Puerto Rican Trust Fund, number 62, to be precise. And the IRS, they give our tax money not to the government, but to the privately owned Federal Reserve. And the money, our tax money, is used to pay the interest on the national debt. I believe that was acknowledged in some documents recently. And the insulting thing about that is if it's used to pay the interest, then the debt will never get paid off because you're not even bothering to worry about the principal. So taxes are totally pointless in that regard. And Dave Champion, I recommend people check out his YouTube channel. Dave Champion is the name of the YouTube channel, not David Champion, Dave Champion. He's a muscular, bald-headed guy with some tattoos. He's hosted a radio show, a Patriot Community radio show for like 14 years or so. I haven't listened to it. I've checked out some of his videos, but he seems like a very knowledgeable guy. He's written a book about the tax fraud, and he explains that if you check out the codes, the black letter law for taxes, you will find that by virtue of the fact that the legal definition of a word will always be different than the standard English dictionary definition of that word, you will find that even though the code, the black letter law seems to say that taxes, everybody's got to pay them, it can be shown that it only applies to people in some international capacity, which wouldn't mean us, and we're not supposed to know that. That's how the scam works. So the key to, if you get taken to court for not paying taxes, well, they'll probably take you to jail first because they want to teach you that you may be able to beat the time, but you won't be able to beat the ride, because that's how despicable these criminal scum are in the criminal justice system. How ironic. And if you fight in court, the key to winning, I guess, would be objects to the commercial nexus. Excuse me, not the commercial, the international term. And there's a couple of other terms you probably object to. You'd have to check out Dave Champion's work to get more familiar with it. Just thought I'd point that out. But I'll make sure I get Athen on. I'll get you on no later than 6:10 Eastern. But first thing, got to do the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First article, lawsuit. Police give lawyer hard drive infected with surveillance malware. A lawyer representing police whistleblowers finds Trojans on department-provided drive. Oh my God, the irony. The police, you're supposed to obey the law, but you're supposed to keep the peace, but you are so hypocritical in this regard. You act like the biggest gang in town. You know, a lot of police wouldn't act like such assholes if they weren't. Check out Mark Passio's presentation, Occult Mockery of Police and Military Personnel, which he gave at the 2011 Free Your Mind Conference, about how the uniforms, the badges, and the colors that police wear, and also judges in terms of their robes symbolizing Saturn, which is a satanic motif, that will make them act like such jerks. It'll affect them at a subconscious level, all that subliminal stuff that they're wearing, and the badges and such, and it'll make them act like such assholes when they're on the force. If only they knew that. Our next article, red linked here, DHS to purchase 62 million more rounds of AR-15 ammo. Feds attempted to control the market, dry up supply. Yes, didn't the DHS? We seem to, I believe they bought something to the effect of 2.2 billion rounds of ammo, and now they're getting another 62 million. As the conspiracy theorists say, is to dry up the market so we don't have ammo, and also to prepare for some sort of economic collapse. We are on a positive timeline, so I'd hate to think that a collapse of some sort would be all that horrible. I mean, we'd have to deal with a few problems as part of the ascension process, but you don't expect it to be too bad if we're on a positive timeline now, would you? But, well, make of this whatever you will. Just don't give up your right to bear arms, folks, or we lose everything. Our next article, leaking of government officials' addresses accompanied by note warning of FEMA crackdown by NWO New World Order Satanists. A publication of sensitive material blamed on right-wing hackers. Yes, right-wing. It's a very stereotypical term to discredit people. And a FEMA crackdown by New World Order Satanists. Yes, FEMA, those FEMA camps. If you haven't watched the Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura episode, the police state episode only aired once on TV because powers that be didn't like them exposing that FEMA built camps all around America to lock up people who don't go along with the New World Order's ways, and maybe they use a virus to justify locking people up in those camps. And now there's some sort of a note of a FEMA crackdown by Satanists. Well, make of this whatever you will, but a lot of people know about those camps. Those that don't, well, you better learn about it. Don't obsess about it. You'll lose touch with reality. Just be aware that they're there and raise awareness and try to stop it, and realize that FEMA has nothing to do with emergency management. Our next article, lights out. City plans to cut power to homes of adolescents accused of vandalism. Story came to the attention of InfoWars after a call to the Alex Jones show. Okay, you're going to cut power to the homes of the adolescents accused. Accused, not convicted. People are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, so just because someone is accused of vandalism, you're going to cut power to their homes. Oh, my God. Don't let your city take advantage of you like this, folks. And don't try to use the excuse that they're accused of vandalism to justify punishing them like this. They haven't been found guilty yet, apparently, so learn your due process rights, folks. This is totally ridiculous. All right, next article. ISIS camp discovered at U.S. border. Open borders allow ISIS to slip into U.S. Yes, that shouldn't come as too much of an astonishment, considering the government is engaged in a conspiracy to open the borders and let illegal immigrants into this country to screw all of us American citizens over by having them take our jobs and whatnot, Cloward and Piven style and everything. And now ISIS is, which they control as well. The U.S. government funds and controls to a great extent ISIS, which is Al-Qaeda, basically, with another name. And they're letting them into America to justify taking our rights, and it's all a scam. Wake up, folks. You got to see through the illusion. Next article. Questions swirl over bizarre Walmart closures. Customers and employees skeptical of claim that plumbing is reason for shutting down of 5 stores in 6 months. Yes, well, you want Walmart to close, folks. Don't let their cheap prices fool you. It's all part of a New World Order corporate conspiracy to shut down small businesses and consolidate everything. So don't fall for it. Our next article. Children beg state to let them go outside. See Child Protection Services grabbing children from normal homes because for whatever the reason, some parents are getting their kids taken away from them because they let their kids play alone outside, which many would say is a critical step in letting children develop. Let them play alone outside. Don't let them worry about something happening to them. I mean, I suppose one could make the argument that since reptilian aliens who control the New World Order to a great extent love to eat children, they might risk getting kidnapped by a reptile alien. But as the law of attraction would say, don't obsess about that, because if you do, it's likely to happen. But if you don't worry about that, then it's less likely to happen. Don't let your thoughts and fears manifest. All right, but no, I'm not saying don't let your kids play outside because they're going to get kidnapped by a reptilian alien. That's ridiculous. You can't be fearful of stuff like that, folks, because that's how they keep us in control. They keep us in fear. So let your kids play outside. All right, one last article. TSA workers caught manipulating body scanners to grope genitals for sexual gratification. Oh, what a disgusting way to end this news segment. Screeners fired after 6 scheme outed. Yes, it is a 6 scheme, and I don't think I need to explain any further. Let's just get rid of the TSA. It has nothing to do with safety, but has to do with controlling and make you feel like you're a slave who deserves to be treated guilty until you're proven innocent when you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So get rid of the TSA, folks. And, of course, the fact that 9/11 was an inside job implies that the TSA shouldn't exist. All right, but enough of that. Sean, I see you in the chat room. Glad to have you live. It's been a while since seeing you live at the time the show started. Glad to have you there. So, Athen, area code 502. I'm sure this is you, Athen. Am I right?
Yeah, it's me. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you contacted me again. It's not very often I get someone saying, can I come on your show? Sure, I'm willing to take requests like that. And, of course, you're a perfect fit because, like I said, it's been a while since I've had an astrology expert on the show. Just a quick couple things I want to point out. If you have to use big astrology terms that anyone who doesn't understand astrology won't understand, don't worry about defining those terms. People can access a dictionary and find the definitions of conjunct house and all the other astrology terms that anyone wouldn't understand as they study astrology. So just use the words, don't try to define them. That's not necessary for the purposes of this interview. And also, this is just going to be a general astrology thing. I'm not really going to ask you to give specific horoscopes for specific people and tell us what's going to happen in the near future, although I do have a couple questions about the years to come. So this is general science behind astrology for the most part, and also that stuff about the cards. So it's only appropriate, Athen, that I ask you to first debunk the astrology skeptics. How can you confirm that astrology is real and not a quack science?
Well, you have to use it, and a lot of times, the people who have something, to say about it in terms of it not being valid haven't actually used it most of the time. And if I'm a firm believer that if you apply it and just with an open mind, just give it a shot, not anything out of the ordinary. Just maybe look at some transits or a horoscope. Actually, get an astrology reading would be the best way to do that. But any type of horoscope would work, and apply it and have an open mind to it. It's really not that far-reached of an idea. All it really comes down to is that the whole reality that we live in is interconnected, and that includes all the events, past, present, and future, time and space. And so the planets are merely a cyclical movement of our reality that we can track, because they are cyclical in nature. And so it goes back to the sort of works of Carl Jung, who talked about synchronicity, which is essentially that you have interrelated non-causal events of the universe, which are connected. And so if you look at any part of the universe, you will see what's called synchronicity and an association to that event by looking at one piece. So in other words, if you look at any one piece of the universe or reality, you'll find basically every other piece. And so that's what astrology aims to do in a nutshell. A lot of times people talk about astrology in terms of energy, and that the energies of the planet somehow have an effect on us. And I don't find that to be the case at all. I find it that it's just that they synchronistically line up with certain events. So, for example, when Saturn is in a certain planet, in a certain sign, it means that, certain events happen, and we can see those events. And it's not that Saturn itself is having a direct cause on our planet. It's just that every time Saturn's in that sign, for example, this event happens. Why? And it's because, there's that synchronicity, there's that non-causal relationship. So that's essentially what astrology aims to do, and it's a valuable tool for self-discovery, for looking at the future, both for yourself and for, the collective and everything going on in the world as well.
Thank you very much. It says here you actually, around the winter solstice of 2011, you experienced a sudden and profound spiritual awakening. I cannot help but ask, what was that experience about? And keep in mind that would have happened not too long after the end of Carl Johann Kalimann's alleged end of the Mayan calendar date of October 28, 2011, not the 2012 date we're all familiar with. George Cavazos told me on that day lots of timelines came together at a profound rate. Make of that whatever you will, but you did experience a sudden and profound spiritual awakening around the winter solstice. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically I was studying meditation at the time, and I was getting very into the present moment. And, because a lot of times we live in our minds, and that's not a bad thing because our mind is a tool to be used, but a lot of us are consumed by the mind. And it's not that, again, it's anything negative, but if we, see reality basically in the present moment, it's very, very profound. And that's essentially what I experienced. It was a very powerful awakening of the present moment. in terms of what reality is, in terms of how everything is interconnected, who I am in a way that's not to be defined. And that was, very, what you would call, what I would call anyways, a spiritual awakening. And it was one of self-discovery, one of understanding my role in many ways in terms of what these shifts are taking place in the world. And it's very, it's very non-intellectual, yet it can be. And that's essentially what we can do with our mind and with tools like astrology, is take a lot of these unseen, feelings, intuition, and connection to, the universe in and of itself, and understand it and talk about it, and, actually put it into concrete, practical terms. And so that's what I've sought to do since then, and astrology has been the major tool for me to do that. I've taken astrology and applied it to my life, applied it obviously in my work, and like I said, it's done wonders. And the beauty of astrology for me is that it keeps everything nice and grounded. So unlike, maybe tarot cards, which we can get to next if you'd like, where you might be opening up yourself to spirits or entities that may not have the best interest in mind, astrology is always grounded in nature. It's always grounded in what's taking place in the universe. And so it just depends on your interpretation of those events. But no matter what with astrology, that at its very core, and if you understand the core of these transits and things, that it is grounded in what's actually taking place. So that's what I've done since then. I've used astrology as a tool to ground spirituality, and that's what I do through my work, basically.
Thanks. And it says you have found Sidereal, if I pronounce that correctly, astrology to be the perfect tool for consciously aligning with the natural flow of the present moment. And it says this system is based on where the stars actually are in the sky, and that helps you access real-time information grounded in nature. Okay, so enlighten us on what is unique about the specific astrology, Sidereal Astrology.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Andrew, because 99%, I'll say 95% rough estimate of what you find online or in any Western source of astrology is actually not really where the planets are. And so I believe that's a conspiracy that goes back to about 2,000 years ago during the end of Roman times, which you can get into if you'd like. But it's been a deception, and it's meant to deter us from actually discovering, again, the truth of what is taking place. And it's called tropical or Western astrology, and it doesn't actually use the real location of the stars. If you watch an astrologer, for instance, on YouTube or something, and they say that the full moon's taking place in Aries, let's say, well, if you actually looked at the full moon, you would actually see it in a completely different constellation. You would see it in the constellation Pisces. And so that's essentially what system I use. I use the system that is actually grounded in what is actually happening. If you go look up at the sky, that's where it's actually taking place. But it was a big veil being lifted off my eyes when I realized that astrology, or at least what I had discovered it from the early part of my studies, wasn't where they actually were. So that was something that really opened up my eyes, and ever since then I've really been using this sidereal, and that's the only form that I really use. And it's been awakening people every day, which is a very positive thing, helping people see that, what do you want to use? Do you want to use a system that was basically propagated by the West and the powers that be, or do you want to use a system that is actually grounded in what's taking place?
All right, and since you mentioned that, some people might say that even sidereal astrology is based on what's not actually taking place. Why do I say that? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, some astrologers, including Santos Bonacci, say that the solar system is actually shaped like a cone. Picture a traffic cone, have the sun at the very top of the cone, and then it draw a straight line down from the sun at the top of the cone down to the ground in the middle of the cone, and the planets would orbit not the sun, but that axis point, that line that you draw down from the sun to the ground. And the reason that is because the solar system is traveling through space at very high velocity, and the planets would trail behind it, and it would appear like a cone spiraling like a corkscrew. And so in that sense, some would say, well, you are basing your astrology on a flat solar system, but it's actually not like that. Not only that, there are more planets. In my interview with John Lear, he said that there are 40 planets, and Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis has said there are 66 planets in the solar system. Now, mainstream science cannot seem to agree on what a planet is. Every time they change the definition, they have to accommodate things that people don't normally consider to be planets. So that goes without saying. But the point is, there's a lot more planets and also a lot more moons than we're told, and the solar system may not even be shaped flat. It may be shaped like a cone. So with that being said, does that in any way change the way you look at astrology?
No, not at all, actually. That's a really good point. Actually, that's the that's the more grounded astrology, because when the solar system transits around the center of our galaxy, that's exactly what it's doing. It's spiraling. It's spiralic. And no planet in the solar system ever comes back to the same point twice, and that's the whole point. And so we look at charts and we see everything as a two-dimensional, flat circle, but it's not like that. It's spiralic, like you said. And so the important takeaway from that is that every time you do come around to, say, Pisces, the energy does change, and that's an important consideration. But to answer your question, no, it doesn't change it, because everything is relative to us on Earth. So regardless of where our trajectory is, which is changing, which is all about the ages, us being in the age of Pisces transitioning into the age of Aquarius, but everything is from Earth. So no matter what's going on with that, you literally go outside and look, and that planet will be in that constellation. Now, what you might be referring to is what's called heliocentric astrology, which is where you take the center of which is the sun, the center of the solar system, as the middle of the chart. Now, if you do that, yeah, it's still the same, but that's a totally different type of astrology. That's some people use it for different techniques. You might say it might be more spiritual or whatever, but the point is that everything does have a grounded element from Earth, and so that's the geocentric model that most astrologers use, is looking at the sky from Earth, and that's what seems to have the strongest effect on us as we do transit the solar system. And to answer your question about the more planets, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot, and so that's why astrology isn't meant to, not meant to keep anything separate. You can look at literally just the transit of the sun or just the transit of the moon and get valuable information from that. So you can add more planets all you want, and that would actually just make things, just add more information to it. It wouldn't nullify anything, and it wouldn't take anything away. So as we discover more planets and more information comes into light, we just add it to the already existing information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and on a related note, let's take it even further. The idea that our solar system, it is said by mainstream science, our solar system only has one star. Well, no, it has at least two others and possibly a third. The idea that there's the star Nemesis, I don't know if I subscribe to that idea, but it has also been said by a couple people. George Kavaslis I did talk about this with him in my private session with him, and Alex Collier was talking about this like in his 90s presentations, that there is actually a second sun. It would be like a red dwarf star for all intents and purposes, that is like on the other side of the sun, and we can't see it because it orbits the sun at the same speed as the Earth. And metaphysically speaking, this second sun, as George Kavaslis told me, is a balance of the male energy. The sun is the dominant male energy, and the second sun, this red dwarf-like star that's right next to the sun, is another balance of the male energy, like the stories of Cain and Abel and Enlil and Enkiel. That's down-to-earth symbolism of the balance of the male energy. And there's also the idea, which Andromeda Council contact Tolek said this. George Kavaslis, I talked about this with him in my interview, and Alex Collier also did mention this, that there is a brown dwarf between the orbit of Earth and Venus, and when Earth ascends into a higher realm of consciousness, we will be able to see this brown dwarf, and we can't see it now because the ETs that brought it in put a cloaking device over it. Yeah, I know this. We're going way off into the deep end with this stuff, but the idea that there is more than just the sun, there's more stars in our solar system, does that in any way change the way you look at astrology?
No, actually, I believe we are in a binary star system, and if you look up, what most scientists have discovered, most of the stars in the sky are part of either a binary or more star system. So it's the minority for a star system to be singular like that, and we do have what's called a sort of wobble to the Earth's rotation relative to the stars, which is what creates the ages that I was talking about, us being in the age of Pisces, relative to the stars, the Earth does this very slow wobble rotation, rotates every 26,000 years. And so as the celestial North Pole rotates, we enter different ages, all based on the spring equinox. But that wobble can't be explained, and modern scientists obviously putting more diluted information on it, say that that's just natural, that we just wobble like a top. But having a binary star system would explain that, and that would make perfect sense, because that would mean that our orbit, that we think we're orbiting, isn't a straight linear path like that. It's actually creating a very slow but steady skew, and it actually, if you look at, Einstein relativity, it'll actually bend time and space the faster we travel through space. So a lot goes into it, but it does explain the ages and the so-called wobble of the Earth. So that's the same astrology I ascribe to, but it doesn't change the astrology again, because everything is still relative to us on Earth. It does change the ages though, and so us being in the age of Pisces, we're entering the age of Aquarius, but it's not because we are wobbling. It's because we are approaching in what I believe to be a upward trajectory, a faster trajectory, closer to the second star, whatever it might be.
Thanks. And question about the cycles. 2,160 years is the amount of time it takes to get from one age of precession into the next one, 12 ages, and 2,160 years one age would last. Well, what's interesting, if you multiply that number by 1,000, you get 2,160,000, and 2,160,000 is, according to Santos Bonacci, the amount of years that it takes for the Earth to go through another precession, a precession in which the Earth rolls over, if you will, cut the 2,160,000 in half, then the North Pole, where it was at the start of that 2,160,000 year period, it would be at the South Pole, and then when you finish the 2,160,000 years, the North Pole will eventually go back to its North Pole position. The Earth basically rolls over, and the idea that this kind of precession exists that lasts 2,160,000 years, does that alter the way you look at astrology in any way?
No, but that's very interesting. I'm going to look into that. That would actually just confirm more things, because again, it's relative to what we're experiencing in the now moment, and using astrology to go outside and look. I mean, that's where these planets are actually transiting. But in terms of the future, like the distant future, in terms of ages, that would significantly change things, absolutely. Especially if we had some sort of polar shift or something like that, which is increasingly more and more evidence suggesting that is the case, actually, that we may be approaching a pole reversal a lot sooner than we realize. And so in that sort of event, and when that happens, we will see it, we will know it, and that will certainly change things. Whether something like that is going to happen in the next year or 2 years in terms of predictive type of astrology, maybe, but I guess if it did, then it would throw all of our charts off, but chances are it's not, and so we're not making any type of predictions that are set in stone. I mean, some astrologers are, but astrology is best used as just a tool to help us gauge, just like anything else, what we are experiencing and what we are to experience, and hopefully prepare for that and just get the most out of it, really.
Okay, another radical idea in regards to how your view of astrology might change. The moon, our moon, Earth's moon, it's definitely not natural. It is so obviously an artificial body, and it has been said that the entities that are controlling it could move it out of its current position at any time if they wanted to, but they're not going to do that because, well, humanity would freak out and everything would kind of go haywire. So even though it's possible, they're not going to do it. The reason I bring this up is the cycles of the moon that you're so accustomed to. It would change radically if they suddenly move the moon out of position. And another thing about the moon that's a little debatable, does it actually rotate? Santos Bonacci did say, yeah, the moon, the reason we see the same side of the moon all the time, the face of the moon that has the man in the moon image is because the moon is rotating at the same speed that it orbits the Earth. But other people say, no, it actually does not rotate at all. It's fixed to have that. It wobbles for all intents and purposes to keep the same side facing, but it's not actually rotating. So this idea that the moon does or does not rotate, that debate, and also the idea that the moon could be moved out of position at any time and, in effect, ruin your lunar readings. What do you have to say about that idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility, and that's the world we live in. Nature changes. And the thing is we do the best we can. We look at the cycle and we make our best prediction in terms of if things stay the same, then this is what we're going to experience. But the important thing to keep in mind here is that these things haven't happened in thousands of years. Not to say they aren't going to happen, or they may not happen soon, or even this year. They very well could. But we have to stay grounded with something. And in my opinion, it's better to use a tool that has been grounded over thousands of years from our knowledge that has not changed, and utilize that, again, not to be dogmatic with it, but in a way being open-minded with it helps us get the most out of it. So I think all of these things, I'm totally with you, are definitely possibilities. But if everything stays cyclical in the way we know it, then astrology will continue to supply the same results that we're used to. And if it does change, astrologers, or at least hopefully most astrologers, would adapt a system to change to that and conform to that to help us gain information for that shift or that time or whatever might be taking place with that particular thing. But like I said, the most important thing is that everything has remained consistent since then, and that does help us use astrology as a tool.
Yeah, a couple of astrological star systems that I want to discuss for a moment. Sirius and the Pleiades. It has been asserted that we are in an orbit. Our solar system is in a three-system orbit. It's our system, the Sirius system, and the Pleiades system. And, well, if that's the case, then we can safely assert that gravity is not the only force that's causing that orbit to exist. Mainstream science has not told us that the exact science behind how astronomical bodies orbit each other. There's other forces like electromagnetism at work that they're not talking about, and apparently that's the case with Sirius and the Pleiades. Astrologer Kelly Rosano, in an interview on In5D Radio, did say that when entities, she was actually talking about the malevolent reptilians in this case, that they will have to answer to Sirius. Sort of like the Sirius star system is dominant to our star system in some sense, and when an entity passes away on this planet, be it a bad reptilian or whatever, it would have to answer to Sirius for its good deeds and its bad deeds. And well, I'm going to ask, can you possibly confirm maybe that is true with the Sirius star system, and in general tell us about the science behind the Sirius star system, the astrological science behind that, and also the Pleiades, and the idea that we all orbit those systems?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's Sirius that I believe is our binary star. But again, I'm open to that because there's nothing, there's evidence, but no preponderance of it just yet. But in terms of my theory of Sirius being our secondary sister star, absolutely. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to sharing, again, like you were saying, the masculine and feminine energies. And Sirius could very well be the sort of checks and balances, because it is the stronger star. It has more of that gravitational, but also, like you said, electromagnetic and all these other sort of energies that we're just coming to realize now. It has a dominance on that, and so this is certainly in an etheric realm. It's also a spiritual realm that applies, and I would agree with that from what you told me. Now, in terms of the Pleiades, I'm not quite sure. They're quite far away. I don't know if I would suggest that we would be in a triple orbit with them. It's possible, I suppose. I'd have to look into that. But the Pleiades have always been very significant. And, this has to do with a very high frequency sort of energy, which, again, we don't quite know exactly what its role is, what kind of energy it is, what it's associated with. But we do know from an astrological standpoint, it is associated with the planet Venus because it's in the constellation of Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. So it does carry a lot of the same characteristics of the Venus principle, which is essentially enjoyment and pleasure in that sort of sense. So The Pleiades is when we look at it astrologically, it's a very creative energy, it's very Venusian energy, and so that kind of energy coming in could certainly have a role. But I would say certainly the Sirius, being the sister star, would have the greatest effect in terms of our checks and balances and making sure that everything is flowing according to astrological and universal principles.
Yeah, just quick bits and pieces thing I want to throw it out here. The asteroid belt, the Oort cloud, and the Kuiper belt, are those insignificant when it comes to doing astrology, or can they play a role?
The asteroid belt, yeah, no, they do. And this goes back to what you were saying before about more planets, because every day we're discovering new planets and we're also discovering new asteroids. And these belts and these asteroids and these comets all play an important role, again, not because they have any effect on us, but synchronistically. There is an order here. There's a symmetry and a sort of symphony being played out that we can see synchronistic events, and asteroids are no exception. So we use, the main asteroids, which is Ceres. We use Pallas Athene, which is another larger asteroid in there, and a few others. Chiron's another asteroid which orbits outside of it, but just like any planet, we can use the asteroids in the same way. Now, asteroids are different than planets, though, because they're sort of temporary bodies. So in the astrology, it's kind of like this temporary transformation that we experience with the aspects to these particular bodies. And so it's one of lessons, it's one of sort of this new energy coming in that we can learn from. What we're learning is essentially with asteroids is to release attachment and reminding us that everything is in fact temporary, and to, in my opinion, live in that present moment and use, these things such as, our minds and even what you might call government to a certain degree, where we are in control of it and it isn't in control of us. And in that way, we use these tools, again, and that's what asteroids shows us. So they show us essentially how to strip away all these attachments, so we're not attached to our minds, we're not attached to governments and these types of things, and help us get back to what life is really about.
Yeah, and I don't think we have to worry about asteroids destroying us. First of all, anybody who watched the Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura episode about death ray technology knows the government could use that to dustify an asteroid, not to mention, as Andromeda Council Contact Tolik said, there are good ETs out there who try to protect the Earth from asteroid impacts. And since you mentioned Sirius, just thought I'd throw it out, Tolik and also Reku Solanich, who I had on my show, have talked about how they've received confirming information that Sirius is a artificial alien biosphere masquerading as an asteroid. But you know what? That's out of the realm of this conversation. Just thought I'd throw that out. But one thing that is within the realm of this conversation, Orion, no longer see it in this part of the sky because the winter season is over now, but it does signal the male energy, that is the male energy dominant area of the sky. George Kavaslis told me that he remembers in a past life that the pyramids at Giza, Egypt, they were put there to anchor the male energy of Orion to planet Earth. So Orion being male energy dominant, and also maybe some other bits and pieces about Orion and how it fits into astrology. Tell us about that.
Man, you're asking some good questions, Andrew. Yeah, this is what it's about right here. Orion, like you said, it used to be a part of the ecliptic many thousands of years ago, and at that time it did play a much larger role. And it is the male energy. It's it's part of what we consider now the constellation of Gemini for the most part. So that being the more masculine side of things, it being an air sign. But what's so important about this is that now, because we're no longer sharing our ecliptic with Orion, it's actually shifted. So we're sharing our ecliptic with Ophiuchus, which is opposite Orion, and has been depicted if you look at history and the sort of symbology of our past civilizations. There's sort of this archetype for the same energy, Ophiuchus and Orion. And they're kind of, again, going into what you said about masculine and feminine energies. Orion being the masculine and Ophiuchus being what you might call the feminine energy to that. And what this goes back to in ancient times is And what we're starting to discover now is that Ophiuchus is the gateway to the center of our galaxy. If you look at, again, if you go out and look at the sky, again, tropical astrology won't show you this, but if you look out at the sky, you'll see that the galactic center is right there, just past from the ecliptic, but inside the constellation of Ophiuchus. And so that's why Ophiuchus has been considered by the ancients, and we're starting to realize in modern times, the God Gate, or the gate into the center of the galaxy, which is a black hole, basically. And there's a lot of theories about what that means, but it's essentially, in the astrological, from what we know astrologically, it's a point of transformation. And when a planet goes past that sort of God Gate, or, center of the galaxy, it transforms. It transforms into something that is much higher in frequency. You might call it ascended, or just in a higher state of consciousness. And so if it's an aspect of ourselves in a planet, we'll notice this, because the constellation after the God Gate is Sagittarius, which is about spirituality, philosophy, expansion. And so that's the sort of trend that we see, and we can gain a lot of information by looking at the, again, correlations with astrology, and understand more about what these constellations actually mean. So Ophiuchus is very much about transformation. It's very much about embracing what you might call, or what I'll say, accepting the fact that we're human. It's right on top of the constellation Scorpio, and it has a lot to do with realizing that we have human flaws, and when we accept these flaws, when we accept these natural human tendencies, then and I'm not saying, flavor them and say and give them, any type of merit, other than they're just part of nature, they're part of who we are, and to not let it control us. Because what happens is the things we're afraid of and the things we push away tend to control us, and that also has to do with the instinctual elements of our human bodies. So embracing all aspects of self helps us get into a higher state of consciousness, essentially, and that's what Ophiuchus shows us, and that's what healing is about, also associated with Ophiuchus and the deeper elements of life. Now, to answer your question about Orion, again, as a corollary to this, Ophiuchus is opposite that. It's the man gate. Orion, the man gate. So this is the opposite of the center of the galaxy. So this is everything beyond the galaxy, essentially. So this is, again, theorized where, man comes in through, the gate, so to speak, but it's also where everything else is. So that, again, has a lot of theories and connotations to it, but this is the energy where you might have, the sort of ET contacts or things like this that people talk about, where it's entities from other dimensions, or it's where they enter through our solar system relative to Earth. So, Orion in and of itself is an energy that we used to be strongly associated with in the past when it was along the ecliptic, but now it's something that we're sort of, in my opinion, shifting away from. I think we're getting closer to spirit. I think we're getting closer to God, or however you see that. And this is what Ophiuchus symbolizes, which is now part of the ecliptic, which is by, according to many astrologers, the 13th sign of the Zodiac.
Yeah, the Ophiuchus constellation, that's above the galactic rift, where the arrow of Sagittarius allegedly pierces the heart of Scorpio, and that area of the arrow points right to the center of the galaxy, and Ophiuchus would be right above that. So you know what, since I mentioned that, let's talk about the whole 2012 thing for a moment. Two galactic alignments. Well, let's do this one by one. The galactic alignment on 2012, where the sun rose in the center of the galaxy, that actually happened, it was said, back in 1998, that kind of alignment. But regardless of how often it happens, I believe John Major Jenkins did say that every 26,000 years the sun will line up in the center of the galaxy at sunrise on the winter solstice, and every 13,000 years, it would be summer. There was summer solstice in another 13,000 years, and then winter solstice another 13,000 years after that, when the sun would rise up in the center of the galaxy. But it still actually would happen more times in that time frame. So the whole astrological significance behind 2012. Well, first of all, what did happen that day? Andrew Bartz has said that was the first time we got to experience universal dream time, where we all decided, are we going to raise our consciousness and awareness, or are we going to be sheeple when we didn't consciously aware of that we were in universal dream time but we were there. And also Tolek, he talked about how that was the day when the core of the Earth blossomed into a fourth dimensional entity. And Jim Self, in my interview with him, did assert that that was when we're all free, in the sense that we are in the fourth dimension of consciousness. We just haven't gotten accustomed to seeing everything as fourth dimension, so we're not really noticing it, but we are in the fourth dimension. Well, that's what he asserts. So in regards to the astrological significance of the 12/21/2012 date and how maybe it ties in with those other things I said, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you, Andrew. Essentially, from the astrological standpoint, though, that's what a lot of the Vedics called the Kali Yuga cycles, which is this sort of up and down progression of the solar system relative to the center of the galaxy. So if you think of, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers know this, if you look at the center of the galaxy, and, in the old model, like you were saying, everything's just two-dimensional. It's just orbiting around on this flat plane. Well, that's not the case with the galaxy, the whole galaxy in and of itself either. What's actually happening is all the stars are doing this sort of up and down like a sine wave, orbiting around the center of the galaxy. So while they go up and down around, we enter, these ages, and that's what the Vedics consider the Kali Yuga. So when we aligned, like you were saying, which is the sun, our solar system aligned with the center of the galaxy, essentially what that means is that we are on that even plane, where if you were to slice it, and look at it in the model of this two-dimensional model that they show us, it is where we are. We're literally right parallel to the center on our trajectory up. And so for the past, cycle, very long time, thousands of years, we were on that downward slope of this. So as we now go up past the, galactic plane, basically, and start to rise up, that's why a lot of people are theorizing that we are entering into this new age, not the ages of the equinoxes, but a different age of the Kali Yuga, which is on an upward trajectory now from a very dark time for many thousands of years into, still not at the peak, but past the middle point. So that's why a lot of people are saying that from now on, what's happening is that it's going to be a constant renewal and, removing a lot of these old ideas, old structures of, this past cycle, which was very, very evil in many ways, into one that is more about enlightenment. And so that's essentially what we're gearing up for. Again, this is thousands and thousands of years. It's very far away, but the important thing here is that at that time, that's when we pass the center of that galactic plane and we're on our trajectory up, which actually says a lot in terms of what the overall theme is. The theme is no longer that darker, evil time period. It's going into a period of now moving from that into one of more about enlightenment and spirituality and, transformation.
Yeah, and there was another galactic alignment that nobody seemed to talk about, but some would assert this was even more significant than the 12/21/2012 galactic alignment. In the summer of 2002, I'm not sure of the month, there was another galactic alignment that happened, and I discussed this in my interview with Jay Widener. This galactic alignment happens once every 13,000 years approximately, alternating between summer and winter solstice, each 13,000-year cycle. And in this, here's how it is. It's the eight-spoked wheel cross. If you've ever seen that History Channel documentary, The Lost Book of Nostradamus, they show in the alleged Lost Book of Nostradamus there's an eight-spoke wheel, and Vincent Bridges and Jay Widener assert that symbolizes the eight-spoke cross in the sky. What is the eight-spoke cross? In the sky, there is a cross. It doesn't move. It's formed by the center of the galaxy and the ecliptic, the equator in the sky. And here on the ground, we have the mundane cross. And I would recommend checking out the end of that documentary, Lost Book of Nostradamus, because they do show a visual image of how you get the mundane cross. Basically, envision the Earth, seeing the Earth from space. You're on the equatorial plane. You're viewing it from space. Draw a line from the summer solstice point to the winter solstice point, and then crossing that, draw another line that goes from the spring equinox point to the fall equinox point, and that line would form on the ground on the Earth, that four-spoke cross. And once every 13,000 years, the mundane cross on the ground and the grand central cross in the sky cross, and that happened in the summer of 2002, and that was a time when we were all in a lot of fear because of 9/11, and a lot of people at that time didn't realize that it was an inside job. And, you know, if you study the Lost Book of Nostradamus, it's kind of appropriate that the message he's trying to convey is, hey, you guys got to wake up, and it's your choice. You decide what's going to happen, because at this point, with the amount of fear you're in, all hell's going to break loose on your planet if you don't wake up. Well, I'm just hypothesizing that, but it just seemed to make sense based on what, like, Jay Weidner and Vincent Bridges said. So that eight-spoked wheel crossing the sky and what it may have symbolized back in 2002 and its 13,000-year cycle period, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so what we're talking about now is we're back out of the Kali Yuga, which is everything relative to the galactic center. Now what we're talking about is everything relative to Earth. So we will have essentially the galactic center in a different part of the sky at different times of this 26,000-year cycle. So what you're talking about is every 13,000 years, it's actually going to be at its halfway point, and so it'll be opposite that. But because you can draw an 8-spoke wheel, you can draw a 4-spoke, you can draw a 16-spoke. All that's really doing is it's dividing up. It's very important. But what it's doing is it's dividing up the sky. And so what that does is it shows us where this whole galactic center is relative to this whole precession that we're experiencing, you know, this so-called wobble. So where the location is of that galactic center is very, very important. And so my guess is around that 2002 time period, that was along one of these very important points, which would have to do with that. And so that's what brings it back into, you know, where we're at now, which is the galactic center is in the winter solstice time period. So we're in that sort of segment of all of this. And if you look at the symbology of the winter solstice, this is the time where we're supposed to be receding, we're supposed to be going within. It's more of a spiritual time. So what my belief system is on all of that is that the powers that be and these entities that are at work here, this is a spiritual battle that we're fighting now, use astrology, and they use this stuff, and they've known this forever, and they have all of the information stored, you know, wherever, probably in the Vatican, but they know this stuff. And so they are using it. And so they use these certain time periods in order to do these things like inside jobs and whatnot. So they're using these cycles and they're using these precessions to their advantage. And that's why it's so important for us to, first of all, see that and to understand why they're making the decisions when they're making it, but also for us to use it in our own lives. Because, again, astrology is a tool, and anyone can use it. It's like fire. You can call fire bad, but you know, it comes down to, are we going to use it, or is the so-called enemy or the powers that be going to use it? So that's a question that I want to put out there for all of your viewers. But in general, in terms of this galactic center, this is a very receptive time that we're in, and we have to be very careful. And that's why most of the masses are so gullible, they're so asleep, they're sucking in so much of this information that's being fed to them, because we are in this very receptive time period as a whole, and it's a very slow cycle, like you said, and it's going to take thousands of years before the galactic center shifts into another location of the sky. So up until that point, it is very important that we expose the truth, we see it for what it is, and we use this receptive time to get in touch with our own spirituality and you know, true spirituality with ourselves, not spirituality of the state or of government or of whatever else, you know, they're trying to force down our.
Just so you know, you are echoing a little bit. I don't know if the NSA is breaking up your signal or just technical gremlins or whatnot, but hopefully that won't be a problem. You did mention the significance behind the winter solstice. I'd like to talk about the equinox and solstice significances. So once again, recap what you said about the winter solstice and also the summer solstice, and then the equinoxes. Talk about those significances. Oh, right. So, so the winter solstice, it's all relative to the sun. So this is, like I was saying, the time of receptivity and spirituality. And, of course, the summer solstice, opposite that, is more of an extroverted time, more of a time of action, and taking a lot of what we learned during the more receptive time, which is the winter time period right now, and putting it forward. And so summer is a time when we want to get active. We want to utilize all the stuff we learned during the winter time period about ourselves, about the world, about all this stuff, and actually take action.
And so that goes back to what I was saying with the galactic center. It's hard to take action for people now because all that energy is being sucked into the, you think of the galactic center. It's a black hole. It's sucking things in. So the same synchronistic description can be applied here. If we have all this energy being sucked into the more receptive side, we got to really will ourselves and make that active effort to take that and move it into the active, action and taking action and things like this. So that's a challenge, but that's what the summer solstice is all about. And so it's very important, especially for us right now, because we just passed the spring equinox. So we're approaching that. Now, this is a time where we're supposed to get active. We're supposed to spread the truth and get, involved, basically. So that's where we get the most out of that transit, and that's where we step into our own power with that, because you better be sure that, powers that be and others are using this time period to that advantage. Now, in terms of the spring equinox, the spring is a time of planting seeds. That's a time of thinking about where you want to head for the next cycle. And so we just came out of that. So we're in a time period now of just slowly starting to take action based on these seeds that we planted. This is of course, in our personal lives, but also on a global level as well, too. And then the fall time period is that of receding. And so that's when we look at our harvest. And that's why, that's the whole time period of harvest. It all goes to the analogy of gardening. So we get the most out of what we cultivated during the summer and take it into the winter period in order for us to, go through the winter and use what, the more of the abundance and things that we've gained during the summertime period to prolong and to help us get the most out of the more spiritual winter period.
Thanks a lot. Now let's do some bits and pieces about all the planets, Mercury through Pluto. And yes, some people like astrologer Jim Delacoli say Pluto should be a planet. One of the reasons they demoted it to a Kuiper Belt object was because the powers that be wanted to get rid of the astrological significance behind Pluto. And I guess we'll talk about Pluto and Capricorn when we get to Pluto, because that's till 2023, and a lot of people are saying that signals the destruction of anything that stands in the way of humanity. Last time it happened was the American Revolution, but I guess we'll wait till we get to Pluto for that. So I don't know if I want to spend any more than 3 minutes per planet. Not that you would need that, but bits and pieces, Mercury through Pluto. And even if there's an astrological significance for planet Earth, by all means talk about it from the perspective of other ET race, maybe what they would see Earth as. So do this, each planet, 3 minutes on each.
All right, sounds good. Let me talk about Pluto, though, real quick, since it's on the topic here. Pluto, there are asteroids, and it's my belief that Pluto is actually an asteroid here, which does not take away from the significance at all. It's very, very powerful. It's the most powerful asteroid, and I'm sure, with scientists, that is what they're doing. They're trying to take away the merit of this very powerful body. But knowing it's an asteroid it gets more information that's important to it, because it doesn't work like a planet. Again, asteroids are about transformation. And so that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of Pluto in Capricorn is transforming systems. But here's the thing, Andrew, is that Pluto is not in Capricorn. And so that's, again, the mainstream media propagating this false reality of where the planets actually are. And, people like Kelly Rosano and all these, this is what they use. They use the tropical system, and no one knows this. I didn't know this. But if you actually go up and take a telescope and you look at Pluto, you will see that it's in the constellation Sagittarius. So it's not in Capricorn yet. So we are in a time period where it's not yet a time of redoing and restructuring the actual the system. That's going to come, like you were saying, it's the early part of 2020. I think it's 2020, maybe 2022, something like that. So when that time period comes around, you better bet that's going to be a time of restructuring a lot of the systems and the real systems, because Capricorn is the buildings, it's the literal governments, it's the literal systems that we built, economic, political, etc. But it's not there yet. But it's approaching there, and if people think they've seen, restructuring taking place in the system, they haven't seen anything yet, because when Pluto actually enters Capricorn, you're really going to see it. Right now, Pluto's in Sagittarius, which means we're all changing. Our philosophies, our spirituality is changing, our life paths are changing right now. So Sagittarius, on a personal level, is that all of our paths are changing, and we're discovering more about spirituality, philosophy, even, science to a degree, because it is, on philosophy, although I don't like to call it that. But there's a lot of restructuring taking place to where we're headed, where we're going individually. But this is also on the global level as well. The whole world right now is going through a restructuring of their ideas, of their philosophies, of spirituality, of who they are, where they come from, and what power they have as individuals. This is all seen from Sagittarius, which is your spirit, it's your soul, it's your power, it's basically your role along your life path. It's a time where we're all discovering exactly what our role is in these major shifts that are taking place. And no one's found it yet because of restructuring. We're still going through that process. And although we're doing things, we're moving forward with it, it's still changing. It's going to continue to change. But when Pluto goes into Capricorn, then it's going to become very, very grounded in the sense that you see a lot of the systems structures changing for sure. And that's the nature of an asteroid. Asteroids restructure, they transform, and Pluto is by far of all the asteroids. Now, to the planets real quick, I'll just go through them very briefly. Let's start with the sun and the moon because those are luminaries, and in astrology, those are considered to be the most important for obvious reasons in terms of they play the most personal role in our lives in terms of events of the sky and things like this that are, again, just synchronistic, not the actual direct effect on us, although the moon does, not in the sense of astrologically. The sun is our intent. The sun is our soul passion. It's our force. And then the polar to that is the moon. That's the receptive side. This is, where we go into emotions and feelings, where the sun is, again, this is the energy. So it's spirit, it's soul, it's passion, it's action. Moon is receptive, it's rest, it's tranquility, it's home, it's family, it's the domestic kind of elements of life, which is very, very important, equally as important. And it's important to have a good balance of both. And looking at your birth chart, you'll see where they're located and where you can gain both that prana energy of the sun and where you can gain that, calming, what you might call emotionally grounded energy of the moon. Now, Mercury is the first after that in terms of importance in astrology, which has to do with our thoughts and our communications. And so this is seen because, again, synchronistically, we can see associations with this. But looking at it in terms of a planet, you can see it's fast, it moves really quick, it's very close to the sun. And so this is, synchronistic to our thoughts and communications, which come from our passion, the sun. So the mind here is what's seen from Mercury. Mercury is essentially gaining and giving and receiving information, basically. So all types of communications, learning, teaching, all of this information that we're sharing, all of this is seen from Mercury. Mercury is very neutral. It's a neutral planet. It doesn't have a polarity. So that's important in the sense that, again, we're talking about the natural state of a human with using rational intellect, which is a very neutral thing, which is, again, a tool which can be used for good or ill and anything in between. Now, Venus and Mars are the next set of polarities and of importance in astrology. You have Venus, like I was talking about before, which is a feminine energy. It's receptive. It's about beauty, art, creativity, enjoyment. It also rules relationships, so we can see relationships from this part of the astrological chart. And then opposite that, Mars, in the masculine side of things, you've got drive. You've got, Mars. This is the planet of action, of intent. We're talking about a lot of the same things like we're talking about with the sun, but with Mars here, it's much more personal. This is the planet of literally taking action, literally getting up, getting that ball moving, and putting that physical force forward. And so this is why things such as war on one extreme can be seen from Mars, but also physical activity on the more personal, everyday end of the spectrum there. Now we have the next set of planets. We have Saturn and Jupiter, which are, again, polarities. Saturn being the masculine energy here, which, again, is going to come up to debate from a lot of astrologers, and that's fine, but I'll explain it. Jupiter being the feminine energy. Sorry, I had those backwards. Jupiter is the expansion energy of the masculine energy, and Saturn is the receptive energy of the grounded element. So, again, we take same thing we're talking about in terms of Venus and Mars, and we talk about the expansion, which is Jupiter, which is essentially asserting our energy forward and putting things out there, and then Saturn is constricting them, making them into a reality, and this is why structures and buildings and things like this, which are fixated, can be seen from Saturn. Now, the next set, Uranus and Neptune, essentially what you have is you have a very high octave of planets here. We've gone beyond the planets you can see with the visible eye. Beyond Saturn, you can't see with the visible eye. So these are very high octave planets. You've got Uranus, which is about change. It's about freedom, essentially. And you have Neptune, which is the feminine side to that, freedom, which is a masculine energy. Neptune, which is about receptivity, spirituality, and this is where we can see things like, peace and presence and having the living in the now moment sort of take on things. And so very high octave. I see it as essentially the polarities of our higher selves, of a very high octave element of who we are consciously. And a lot of change can be seen from these planets because they operate on such a high frequency that they're not in our everyday experiences like, say, Venus and Mars might be, or even Jupiter and Saturn for that matter. But they are still playing a very important role in terms of our spiritual transformation. Freedom is something that's very inherent, and that can be seen from Uranus. And spirituality and tranquility is something that's very inherent, which can be seen from Neptune. So that's, in essence, all the planets, all the way from the luminaries to Mercury to Neptune, and then the asteroid Pluto, which is the most important. And like I said, we also have Chiron and a few other asteroids, which I won't cover. But essentially, looking at the location of these bodies in the birth chart, you can see where the aspect of your consciousness on a personal level, how it's involved and where it works and how it works. And that's why astrology is such a powerful tool in terms of seeing exactly what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how to get the most out of your experiences here on Earth.
Yeah, what about planet Earth? You didn't cover that. I remember Jim Delacoli said if an ET race were to see a significance behind Earth, it would be love. Seems kind of paradoxical because it's a prison planet still with the powers that be still controlling us to some degree, although their time might be up soon, hopefully. But anyway, Earth, what do you see about that?
Yeah, Earth is not often looked at in astrology. I mean, it is, but indirectly, because every time we look at the sun astrologically, we're looking at the Earth, because always opposite the sun is the Earth, right? So when we do our interpretations of the sun, the interpretations have been, over time, you can tell they've been adapted to take into consideration the opposite. There's always an opposite, right? So if something's in Sagittarius and the opposite's Gemini. So wherever the sun is, always opposite that is the Earth. So astrologically, you look at the sun, which again, like I was saying, is that solar energy, is that passion, prana. And then so opposite that, where the location of the Earth is where you need to be grounded. It's where you need to be grounded in order to have that. And so that's what the Earth shows us. It doesn't have I wouldn't say it has a polarity. If it did, it would be of a feminine nature. But again, astrologically, it would be kind of like the polar of the sun, which is where if you're going to have soul, you're going to have passion, well, you got to stay grounded. And basically Earth in your chart will show you where you can stay grounded, where you can stay connected to nature, and and have that footing in terms of your spirituality. Because without grounding all of this stuff, then it really doesn't do any good here on Earth. So it's where you can really have the most impact on Earth when you're staying grounded.
Okay, I do have some questions in the chat room. I want to go over them. Jason of Roba has asked, I think you sort of covered this with a Kali Yuga, but just a general answer, I guess he asks, I would like to ask your guest if there may be a connection with the end of the Kali Yuga, the powers that be, the chaos on this planet, and if all this chaos is necessary in order for the Golden Age to rise from the ashes of the Kali Yuga.
That's a good question. I do not believe astrology is deterministic in the sense that we can decide how it's going to unfold. I think free will is the most important thing that we have. And so nothing necessarily needs to happen or is going to happen other than we better change and we better start utilizing the energies of these ages and of these Kali Yuga cycles in order to make this change, one that promotes life and not death. And so, again, this is what we make of it. And so to kind of answer that question, being in this Kali Yuga and being in this age that we're in the age of Pisces, what we want to be doing right now is we want to be focusing on our own, it's very personal. We have to get ourselves straight. We got to get our own soul, our own spirit straight first. And once you have that, then naturally everything else will flow from that. And if it is something, through your work or whatever. But the important thing now is that we raise our frequencies. And that's what that whole shift was in that 2012 time period, is we're coming out of a lot of the dark, and we're stepping into possibilities now of raising our frequency. So we have free will. We can start raising our frequency, and that's the choice we have. If we do, then there's nothing that's going to happen. The only thing that's going to happen is change. And so it can either change for, again, promoting life or death, but that's up to us. And it's up to us individually, but we have to literally do it individually first and then get our shit together, excuse my language, get together and pull this thing out of, this very dark period that we've been in.
Thanks. And here's the other question. It is sort of an own chart reading. Do you have all the stuff near you to do a reading? Or if not, I can't answer that. Well, you can't answer this, but can you do a quick reading?
For an individual?
Yeah.
I could. I usually don't like to do them with such short notice because there's a lot of stuff you have to take a look at in the astrology. You don't want to look at things in isolation. But, if you give me that birth information, there is something important that I could give that individual.
Okay, here it is. Psychic Sean Cohen is asked, saying her birth date, April 6th, 1956, at 2 a.m. in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 17 degrees Capricorn rising, Pluto hovering very near now my ascendant, she writes in parentheses, second Saturn return, Uranus exact degree on my Sun conjunct Mercury at 16 Aries.
I'm not going to get into all that. That's a lot of interpretation. I'm gonna show her. Is it female, Sean? Is that right?
Yes.
I'm going to show her life path real quickly, and a lot of those calculations in terms of her ascendant and stuff is probably going to change. I mean, maybe, I don't know if she's probably not looking at this sidereally like I am. So let me just get that birth information, and I'll give her a life path reading real quick. So just to make sure, I have the 6th of April, 1956 at 2 a.m. in Pittsburgh. Is that right? Hello, Andrew?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, that's right. Sorry about that. I was on mute.
Oh.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so let's go and move to the next topic because I have to pull up this chart in the meantime.
Okay. One other planet that I want to ask if it has anything to do with astrology, the planet Nibiru of Zechariah Sitchin lore. It does exist. Sitchin was right. He was not a fraud. He was not a disinfo agent. I do debunk that on some of my other shows. Not going to get into this, but quick things about Nibiru that Andrew Bartz has said. He said it is a free-roaming galactic entity planet. It has a drive in that requires no solar system to support it. It has a dimensional drive and not a unity consciousness drive like Earth. Nibiru's consciousness just needs leadership society to function psychically with crystalline technology of the dimensional drive so they can go anywhere they want and do what is within their free will. And the Anunnaki, according to Tolek, are just one of several races on Nibiru. And Patricia Corey, in my interview with her, she said that Nibiru used to belong to the Sirius star system, but when the Sirius star system, I don't remember which star it was, I think it was Sirius B and not Sirius A, when Sirius B ascended, Nibiru did not go along with the ascension. It was flung out of Sirius, and now it's in a 3,600-year elliptical orbit around our sun, and the outer part of its orbit is very close to Sirius. So it's sort of in a limbo state between our system and Sirius because it didn't make the Sirius ascension, and the Anunnaki are coming to our planet basically to get some energies, the gold and whatnot, to help, not necessarily for their atmosphere. Sitchin said he was kind of mistaken about that, but it was to help them keep their consciousness alive while they're in this state of limbo. Well, that's what Patricia Corey says her Syrian contacts have told her. But have you ever looked into the astrological significance behind the planet Nibiru?
No, but I certainly am now because a lot of that is clicking for me. It makes a lot of sense. I'll have to look into it, but no, nothing personally that I can share about it, no.
All right, fair enough. Another thing, want to ask you is, use your imagination here. If you were an ET race on another star system, the astrology would be different than on Earth because the stars that you see up in the sky are not going to look the same as they are here on Earth. And you could also make a similar case with those who are in the southern hemisphere. They're not going to be seeing the same zodiac that we see in the northern hemisphere here on planet Earth. So, using your imagination, if you were an ET on another planet, or and for that matter, if you were in the southern hemisphere and doing astrology from there, how can you see it being different here on Earth than here on Earth?
Yeah, that's a good question. But first of all, the southern hemisphere won't change anything relative to us on Earth. The planets and the sun and the moon and all that are in the same constellations, regardless of the northern and southern hemisphere. It would just change the seasons. That's all it changes. But in terms of your question about life on other planets, that's absolutely right, and that's what it is every planet that we're akin to or born on, we do have that connection to what the planet is going through, what's relative to that planet, its relation to everything else, and that's what makes our particular experience here on Earth so unique, because on another planet, you're going to have, we made these constellations. We looked at them and we said, okay, this is what this means. This is the synchronicity that it means for us. And if you go to a completely different planet, you're talking about completely different archetypes, completely different, synchronistic events, probably completely different states of consciousness based on the planets that are orbiting that sun. And, you're talking about something that is just, you would have to literally live on that planet and experience it and see what the synchronistic events are unfolding in terms of when this sister planet, close by planet goes into this particular constellation, what happens. And then through that, it would build a system. But I would bet in either case, you would still have polarity. You would still have negative, positive, or feminine, masculine polarities with the planets, also with the constellations. And there would be a sort of, like a geometry to it. But the geometry, again, would just be so different. It would be completely alien to us. But again, you could look at it and synchronistically make predictions, and but that would take obviously thousands and thousands of years.
And on that note, I'd like to point out Andrew Bartzis has said that the stars that we see up in the sky is just a manifestation of a belief system that has been imposed on us over many centuries and millennia over what the stars should look like. If we realize that, it would be possible to see many more stars than are actually up there, and that sort of ties in with what you said earlier about how there are more planets in the solar system, and how you would doesn't really change the way you look at astrology. It would only really expand it and make things more I guess, understandable to some degree. But you know what, just a quick thing on that. Do you subscribe to that idea that there's more stars and it's all our belief system that has caused us to see what we see?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the collective consciousness. So what we're experiencing right now is we're experiencing a lot of collective belief systems that are shaping our reality, and that's just the nature of being inhabitants on Earth. But the most important thing in terms of astrology, what we want to look at is we want to look at the fundamentals. And so he brings up a really good point, and so did you, in terms of you want to look at stars. You want to look at every little bit and what happens when this planet goes across this star. You want to be very careful, like labeling things, especially in terms of constellations, because what ends up happening, and this happens a lot in modern astrology, is they confine things to boxes. And they say, okay, when it's like this, then it's absolutely like this. Well, no, that's not the case. Things are changing. But there are synchronistic things. There are these patterns that happen, but it's, what it's really related to? It's not the constellations, actually. It's the stars that make up the constellations, because those are the things that are fixed. Those are the things that do not change. And it doesn't matter what you're seeing in the star group cluster. That same energy you're going to find synchronistically when the planet goes over those particular unique stars, which are just the very specific dots in the sky.
Thank you. We do have another question. What you were saying?
Okay. I was just saying I'm ready for that reading whenever you are.
Oh, all right. Just throw it out.
Okay, so Sean, basically what I've done for you is I've looked at what's called your Rahu Ketu North and South nodes, which you might be familiar with, but the chart you were mentioning was your tropical chart, like I was suggesting. Your ascendant's actually Sagittarius. Your sun is in Pisces, and your moon is in Capricorn. So that might be a little bit different If you're interested in this type of astrology, which again uses the actual locations, check out my website, masteringthezodiac.com. But your north node I can look at for you very quickly here to give you a life path reading. Essentially, your north node is in what's called the 11th house, and it's in Scorpio. So your life path here is to do something relating to groups or collective things to get involved with. The 11th house is the world, and it's the changes that are happening in the world. And so to be a part of that on some level, whether it's on a community level, whether it's humanitarian, whether it's large or small, doesn't really matter. Could be technological as well. Now, what's unique about your chart is that it's not only in the 11th, but it's in Scorpio, and Scorpio has to do with the truth of life. And so your north node and listening to this kind of show is awesome because what we're exposing is the truth, or what we're uncovering is the truth. And so this is what your life path is about. It's about uncovering the truth, seeing the truth, sharing the truth, and bringing that into something of a global nature, but again, not in necessarily a large sense, but it could be something you're doing in a local community or something maybe through technology, even through the internet, and maybe social media, talking, sharing information with groups, basically. It could be your friends. It could be anything like that.
Well, Sean, I hope that answers your question. But want to ask another question here from Jason Robup. He says, what are some of the things we can do to harmonize with the current age? Would a good start be to get our astrological chart made, and could we contact you to do it for them?
Yeah, I offer free charts. So if you want a chart, you can just go to my website, masteringthezodiac.com. If you want me to cast it, I also offer that service, which you can check out on the website. But it's free. Just go on there, type in your birth information, and you'll see where the planets were according to a specific system that is on that site. Now, keep in mind, the system that's on the site is what's called the Lahiri system. It's grounded in what's actually in the sky, but it does an even 30 degrees for your stars, for your constellation. So it's not the exact locations of where they are in the sky. If you want that, you'll have to contact me, but it does a pretty good job. And anything next to a certain constellation you want to read as a blend of energies anyways. But it's certainly a step up from tropical western. So, yeah, have a look at that, and that'll definitely be a step in the right direction.
Okay. Did you, by the way, answer the first part of that question? What are some of the things we can do to harmonize with the current age? What do you think are some general things besides the chart being made?
Oh, right, yeah. So basically, that's, again, what this comes down to. It's about self-discovery. So in my opinion, that's what we're supposed to be doing right now. We're supposed to be doing self-discovery. We're supposed to be finding our life path. And so it doesn't matter if you're using astrology or, other tools for this, but there's, it's a time of exploration. So I would say tap into your adventurous side, spread the truth, spread the information, because all of this goes back to this very important Sagittarius energy right now. But we're in the age of Pisces, and I actually didn't get to talk about that much, but I want to say very briefly that being in the age of Pisces, this is a time where we want to get good with spirit, or, with God, or with the universe, however you see that. And as we approach the age of Aquarius, we want to be very careful that we're not just accepting some sort of global community kind of agendas that might be pushed on us. Right now, what we need to be finding is we need to be harmonizing our connection to God or the universe. And then from there, slowly starting to get involved in real communities, linking up with like-minded individuals to share information. And that's going to be a transition for the next many hundred years. So for our lifetime, that's exactly what this is about. And that's what we want to do. So getting involved, sharing the truth, community, again, healthy community where you're an individual, you're not just a cog in the system type of community stuff here, then you're moving in that right direction. But it's only going to come from, being right with God or being right with the universe, and really honing in on your intuition, honing in on your spiritual self, on your spiritual higher self.
All right, thanks. Let's switch gears, talk about the wholesome units behind tarots, because I watched your YouTube videos, and after you do like some daily readings, you do pull a tarot card out of a deck which you shuffle. Could you tell us the significance behind that, and also why you find tarot cards to be so cool. I think they're cool. I use the Deviant Moon Tarot.
Yeah, no, tarot's awesome. You would just want to make sure, you stay very grounded. In my opinion, this is for everyone out there. Just stay very grounded with this stuff because, anything can come through a tarot reading. And that's why I really like astrology because it keeps everything, like I was saying earlier, grounded in what's actually taking place. But if you're grounded and you've got that strong connection to, spirit, your higher self, God, then tarot is another very, very valuable tool. But in terms of my readings, I use the astrological tarot cards for me personally because, again, for me, I like to keep it grounded in the astrology. So when I draw a card, I'm not reading anything separate from what's taking place in the astrology. I'm always tying it back into it. So, for example, I might draw a card of Mars, for instance, and then I'll actually look, okay, where's Mars located? What kind of aspects is Mars forming? And it never shies away from that, no matter what. So that's what keeps it grounded, and that's my advice. Absolutely, tarot is great. Oracle cards are good. Just make sure that, again, you are very, grounded. And if you are getting a reading from someone, make sure that they are grounded and they're not just a vessel for some other entity to come through and convey some information. And that actually brings up a really good point is always, 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 no matter what, whether it's tarot or astrology or whatever, trust your inner guidance. If your inner guidance is telling you it's not right, then don't listen to it. These things are just meant to be tools. And if it doesn't confirm what you already know, then just throw it away because if we don't believe it, if it's not within us, it doesn't matter anyway. So that's the most important thing, no matter what you're using. But I would say especially for tarot. But yeah, tarot is very valuable, very good stuff. Again, synchronistically, in my opinion, we can see that there's certain non-causal events shaping up. When we draw a card, we get a certain kind of understanding of what that card means, a lot like the constellations, which can give us an indication of, maybe what environment we're in, what decisions to make, and same type of information we can get from like astrology.
Thank you very much. And let's talk about the upcoming near future in regards to 2015, what it holds. Let's let people try to get in tune with our current time, astrologically speaking. Carrie Samuels, who's a numerologist and an astrologer who's known with numerologist.com, which I get emails from, she's talked about how the year 2015 is a perfect time to manifest abundance, among other things. It's a good time to start doing like meditations to attract wealth, be it money or some other wealth or abundance. Hopefully, if you do that enough and really set your heart to it, you can get money unexpectedly from some unexpected sources. I've been doing that a lot recently, and I actually recently added a donate button to the website natureofrealityradio.blogspot.com if anybody wants to donate. Oh my God, I'm asking for money. I'm sure the trolls are going to try to discredit me for that. Well, let them discredit me all they want. It doesn't bother me at all. The point I'm trying to make is maybe if I keep setting my heart to these money and wealth and abundance meditations, then maybe it'll help me in the near future with that donate button. And Sean Cohen did tell me that she sees me making some more money in the future. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but hey, donate to me if you want. But anyway, the point is, I'm digressing, 2015, the point is it's a time of wealth and abundance, according to her, a great time to do those meditations. And I guess this sort of ties into what the person in the chat room asked about, how we can get in tune with the current time. But 2015 specifically, what do you have to say about all this wealth and abundance, and what should we do in this time period?
She's probably looking at something tropically again, Western, because I'm getting a completely different reading for 2015. Not that there can't be abundance for anyone individually. For one, everyone's got their own transits in their chart. Where these planets are aspecting your birth chart, your personal planets, will depict more personally what this means. But on a collective level, what we've got Saturn transiting Scorpio right now. We're going to have Jupiter going into Leo for the second half of this year, and for the first half of 2016 as well. And so that's a transition that's going to take place. But the most important thing is we've got that North Node, a lot like that reading I did. The North Node is very, very powerful. And what I was conveying to Sean is that if you follow this life path, you follow that direction, again, listening to your inner guidance here, you will find that flow. You'll find naturally things will will come to you that are meant to come to you. But for all of us, on a collective level, the North Node is transiting Virgo this year. And so Virgo is about self-improvement. It's about health. It's about diet. It's about watching what you take into either your body, your mind, whether it's through television or whatever, your emotional body, and your spirit. So getting right with your health, getting right with your self-improvement, and grounding your spirituality in many ways, living it, embodying it. But in a nutshell, it's just staying grounded. It's improving. It's constantly taking care of your health. So that's the opportunity that's going to be available for all of us. And if we move in that direction, we can each individually make some great strides in that particular area. Now, in terms of this, whole energy, in terms of, like, let's say abundance, because Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is where we can see this. And so Jupiter right now is transiting Cancer, but like I said, he's about to shift into Leo. So the abundance has been about our emotional body, and it's been about perhaps a lot of opportunities to get in contact with, our home, our family, our emotions, our spiritual body, realizing more about our soul level and who we are, where we come from. These types of things has been the opportunity. But the next couple months, that's all going to shift, and it's going to shift into Leo. So Leo is about self-expression. So Jupiter in Leo for a full year is going to be basically an abundance of self-expression. It's going to be an opportunity basically for everyone to be creative, to express themselves, to let their light shine basically, because Leo rules the sun. And so now we come back to that whole energy of radiation here. The Cancer was the moon. So we're coming out of a very watery time period, very watery, especially with all these eclipses and everything that took place in Pisces. But now it's going to slowly, as we get into the summer time period here, more and more about passion, creativity, expression, and again, being yourself. And so that's going to be the greatest opportunity. And again, this can be the way that you'll attract, things into your life because of the planet of expansion. But it all comes down to your birth chart in terms of how you'll more specifically be able to do that. Another important element, like I was saying, Saturn is a very important planet. He's transiting Scorpio, and he's what's called retrograde. He's moving backwards in the sky, right? But he's in Scorpio, which means that this year and for the next 2 years, really after this year, it's going to be about really getting serious about truth, because Scorpio is about our truth. It's about our depth. It's about honesty. It's about transparency. And this is, of course, happening on a personal level in our relationships. A lot of people are getting very committed with the truth, getting very committed with emotional connections in their relationships. A lot of transformations are happening through relationships. And so this is going to be another year. This is actually just went in here at the tail end of last year, but this is going to be a year of not only of health, an opening for that, and of expressing ourselves, but also about really setting a nice, solid foundation with the things in our life that are truly important to us. What is true to us? What is true on a global level, but what is true for us as well? And so this has to do with, the depth, what we're really connected to in life and what life is really about to each of us uniquely. So it's going to take hard work because that's the nature of Saturn, but that's an opportunity there to really take the grounded approach to getting the most out of life and really connecting to things on that deep, truthful, honest, and raw level. So in a nutshell, that's the overall energy. We're still going to have Pluto in Sagittarius. We're still going to have Neptune in Aquarius, Uranus in Pisces. So that's an ongoing theme. But we are coming up to some eclipses here, coming up here. I think it's, late August, or no, late September.
Let me stop you for a moment, because that was actually going to be my next question. I have the article here. It says a total lunar eclipse will take place on September 28th, 2015. It is the latter of 2 total lunar eclipses in 2015 and the final in a tetrad, which is 4 total lunar eclipses in a series. Other eclipses in the tetrad were on April 15th, 2014, October 8th, 2014, and April 4th, 2015. This lunar eclipse will be particularly rare because it is a harvest moon lunar eclipse taking place also on the day of the closest supermoon of 2015. 15. And Matt Kahn, in an interview he did on Helene Lipson's radio show, said that that is the day that about 1/3 of humanity will resonate with fifth dimensional consciousness energies. But in my interview with Neil Kramer, he was skeptical of that. He says he doesn't see that many people being awake by that time. Make of that however you will. Just thought I'd point that out. But that's the information about that lunar eclipse. What I have to say about that.
Yeah. That's the information there. It is a ending time of a lot of eclipses, and so it's a culmination point where we see this in the astrology, and so that's what's really going to be, the highlight of this fall time period that we're coming up to, and there's a lot of interesting things around that time period. If you look at the astrology and look at again these eclipses. And what it has to do with is essentially it has to do with the law of the spiritual transformation. And so it can certainly be, a lot of these people, they're not far off. I mean, they're all basically talking about the same thing here. And the thing here is, though, we want to make sure that we are staying, again, grounded, because this is the North Node energy. So I've been really thinking about, with the powers that be and a lot of this manipulation of energy, we want to be very careful right now in terms of, who we're listening to, what entities we're communicating with, and what ascension we're talking about here. Because the ascension is happening; it's happening all the time, absolutely. But there's a lot of forces at work that are manipulating this, and I think September is going to be a time period where it's very important that you stay grounded with, again, your internal guidance here, because I think it's going to be a time where a lot of information, a lot of different sources, and a lot of paths are going to unfold for us to go down, and spiritually speaking. And we want to make sure that we are, again, staying true to our higher self, our true self, staying grounded with that, and not getting caught up in any false hopes and false dreams. Again, not suggesting anything in particular is, but those are certainly going to be there. So just being very straight with self, and like I was saying with that North Node, the way to do that and the path to do that is to get yourself right with your body, with your health, with your physical body. Stay grounded here through this process and maintain that connection to spirit, to your true self, your higher self there. But just to kind of expand on that, what you were saying about the eclipses, it's going to be an intense time, and there's a lot of different ideas and a lot of people actually saying that it could be a very revolutionary time. It could be a time of a lot of change in the world, and in astrology it does line up. It all lines up. But from what the greatest takeaway, again, how we can get the most out of it is it's more of a grounded and spiritual connection to God and connection to the universe, not any false lights, so to speak.
Okay, and let's expand on how your looking of astrology is different from some of the other people that I mentioned. You say they're using a different system than you. On a similar note, you got the whole idea of different calendars being used. Like we use the Gregorian calendar in this part of the world, also known as the Western calendar, which is a solar calendar. Every 365 and a quarter days, the sun, the Earth orbits the sun, and it may need some tweaking in a few millennia, the leap years and everything, but it's solar. And then there's the Chinese calendar, which is solar with a lunar quality to it. And I guess somewhat related to this whole thing is masculine and feminine energy. You could think of the Chinese calendar as being having more female, feminine energy than the Western calendar, which is more male energy, because it kind of makes sense because the moon is female energy, the sun is male energy. But a lot of people, when it comes down to this, would say no, don't go strictly with the Eastern calendar, the Chinese calendar. Don't automatically go with the astrology that Athen Chimenti you are using, because, well, then if you do that, you're going to be a little too female energy, right brain dominant. Not saying that the astrology you use is feminine energy. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe you can clarify that for me. But some people would say, well, you don't want to be feminine energy, right brain dominant. You got to combine the male and the female energy and the left and the right brain to have a balance. So we need to form a balance between the the Western and the Chinese calendar, just like maybe we need to find a balance between the astrology that you do and the astrology that some other people do. So this idea of using a balance to accommodate different astrologies and different calendars, and maybe how it ties in with male and female energies, what do you have to say about all that?
Yeah, that's right on. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to balance those two polarities. Now, my system doesn't really ascribe to east or west in that sense. The east does use sidereal, but this is the Vedic system, and it is what you would consider more of the feminine nature because of the way that they interpret it. I think to answer that more specifically it's more about interpretation because, again, the astrology I use is merely just where they are in the sky. And so what I like to do is I like to, like you said, keep that balance, that middle path between the masculine and feminine polarities. But there's no doubt that when you use the tropical system, essentially what the tropical system does, just to kind of summarize it real briefly, is it casts the whole chart for 0 degrees Aries at the beginning of the equinox. So essentially what that means is they are casting the chart for Aries, and Aries is a very masculine dominant energy. I mean, it is the most, I don't know, not to be compared, but it's the beginning of the chart. It's the first of the masculine energy. So this Aries energy it was the age of Aries when this was aligned last, and so that was during the Roman Empire, the age of Aries, and so that was a time of war, it was a time of action, it was a time of asserting your dominance. And so this is the chart that they use. They use the chart casted to 0 degrees Aries. Now, that's very, very masculine energy, if you ask me. I mean, it's pretty intuitive and common sense. Now, the East uses very deterministic interpretations, the Vedics in particular. So they'll say, look, their astrologers can predict the future. And if you go see a real Jyotish, which is what they're called over in India, they'll say they're predicting the future. Now, whether they are or not, I'm not going to get into that. But the point here is that that's very feminine because that's purely receptive. If you have your whole future outlined, then all you can do is just be receptive to that. So I do think that my approach is balanced in that way, but the actual form of astrology I use doesn't go either way because, again, it's just using the actual stars in the sky. It would come down to either how you're casting the chart, which is the way tropical uses more the dominant masculine, or how you're interpreting the chart, which is more how the Vedics or Eastern interpret the chart, feminine-wise.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. You want to have a balance in life. Of course, one situation that's sort of an exception to that is when the powers that be tell us we need to have a balance between liberty and security, so give up your liberty for security. Yeah, that's all a scam. But all the other times you want to have a balance in life, then try to have an actual balance that's genuine. But digressing, one thing I do want to talk about, the phenomenon of the sun and the moon dueling. You never see the sun in the sky at night, but you can see the moon in the sky during the daytime sometimes, and some people say the sun and the moon, the male and the female energy, are dueling. So do you know, astrologically speaking, what that's all about, and maybe how we could perhaps get in tune with the dueling energies maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's exactly what the sun and moon do, and that's what we call the lunar cycle. So when we have a new moon, essentially they're right next to each other. And so that's a time where we have a sort of combination of both the masculine and feminine energies. And during those certain times of the year, during eclipses, that's your solar eclipse, right? So the solar eclipse is an extreme of that where it's very, very combined. But then in a normal lunar cycle, every 28 days, we have the moon going into different phases. And so those phases are all relative to each other. So it's not that we're following the moon when we look at the phase of the moon. We're actually following the moon and the sun. So they're dancing. And so wherever they are aspecting each other and where they are in relation to each other shows this sort of dance and this push and pull energy. The new moon being the combination, the full moon being the opposing. So it's very important that in full moons that we balance. That's very, very important because it's not natural. There's a lot of pushing and pulling taking place. That's why a lot of people, if you look at full moon energy and if you look at mythology and things, it's a time where people can go quite crazy, and that's because there's a disassociation between what you might call the emotional side and the conscious side of life. But individually, what we want to do is we want to balance those two energies and bring them and harmonize them within. So those are two very important phases, the new moon, the full moon, then everything in between, which going back to your your 8 spokes. This is how we divide up the lunar cycle. But again, you can divide it up into 16, 32, whatever, 9 parts if you wanted to. But the relationship between sun and moon will show you how they're dancing and where the energies between masculine and feminine are interrelated. And so the most common phases, you have the new moon, then you have the, crescent moon after that, which is a time of starting to move forward with new ideas and starting to move forward with a little bit of that masculine energy. Then first quarter phase, which is you have a lot of pushing forward because it's an action time. The moon's halfway full, but not totally full. Then you have the what do you call it? I've drawn a blank. Anyways, there's a period right before the first quarter and the full moon, which is a time of getting closer to that full moon, of asserting a lot of this, more masculine energy. Then full moon is full on because the moon is completely full of light. Then the disseminating phase, and then, so forth and so on until you come back to the new moon. So it is this dance, it's this sort of, balance between where is the lunar cycle and how can you utilize that energy. Because in a new moon, you want to be using that time receptive. You want to be contemplating. You want to be thinking about your ideas. And when it's a full moon, you want to be taking action. You want to be really moving forward with a lot of these, ideas that you had during the new moon energy. It's much more extroverted, much more action-oriented. But, of course, that's why it's so important for you to maintain that balance at that time.
Thanks a lot. The idea of starting something at a new moon, they say that's the best time to do it. In fact, I recently spent $44 for this program where I get in tune with the guardian angels and spirit guides out there and the archangels and such, and hopefully it'll change my life for the better. And the person who was giving the talk to sell the product said she recommends I wait until this Saturday to start it because that's the new moon. So But the thing I'm trying to ask about this, I mean, sometimes people in life, like maybe on the day of a full moon or a few days before the full moon, they might want to start something new, but then they may think, no, wait, there's a full moon about to start. This is a bad time to start something. But others would say, no, don't do that. If you want to start something, you think it's going to be good, don't not do it because it's not on the new moon. Just next time, try to make sure that you plan ahead so you'll be able to start something on the new moon. But you shouldn't not start something that spontaneously came to you before the full moon, because then you're just setting yourself back in life. So do you agree with me on that, that if you, before a full moon is about to occur, if you want to start something new, you should just start that new thing and just disregard the fact that you didn't start it around the new moon time?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the whole free will thing. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But there is a flow, right? So you could we're always starting something. I mean, with every breath, we're starting a new breath. So that it's a matter of how you're utilizing the energies. And the reason, you have to look at the principles here in terms of where we get all this astrology from. The reason why the new moon is a good time to start thinking about ideas, actually, just so you know, astrologically, you want to wait till the crescent phase before you start to take action, because in the new moon, you want to be thinking about things. You want to be reflecting. You want to be gathering all of your eggs, so to speak, in the basket so that you can start to implement your ideas once the moon starts to fill up. Because the more energy, the more sun bouncing off the moon, the more energy you have for your goals and your drive. So if you are starting it in any phase, though, doesn't matter when, if you're starting in the full moon, you just have to go in the flow of the moon. And so in that sense, there's a lot of energy. The moon is completely, having that sun solar energy to the utmost. So the key there is if you do start something, it's going to be very, you want to make sure, again, you have that balance, because there's going to be a lot of passion. There's going to be a lot of drive, a lot of passion, a lot of that active energy to do it, which that's why they normally say wait till the more calmer time periods when you're more at peace with your emotional state and your conscious state before you start something new. But full moon, just make sure that you balance the emotional state with the very passionate conscious state at that time, and you'll be getting the most out of it. You can start new projects. If you want to wait, that's it's your prerogative. It may be something that you might find that it just takes on a different nature. A lot of times if you start something during a full moon, it's much more of a, you may have to come back around during the next new moon to kind of work out the details, and get it, straight so it can last longer, whatever it is, if it's a business or whatever. But, start it and then just go with the flow and just do what the lunar cycle is doing. And the more you do that, whether you're starting or beginning and ending projects, then you'll be at least in a flow where you're in harmony with the energies at that time. Because if we go to any extreme, let's say we go to an extreme of the full moon, and we're just all passionate, we're not listening to our feelings whatsoever, well, that's that's a choice we make. And if you make that choice, then chances are, and I'm not going to predict it either way, because again, it's free will, but chances are, from what we've seen, it probably won't turn out very well. So that's where astrology comes in. It's not just so much about timing of events as much as it's about how to utilize the current energies to get the most out of them.
Yeah, and on that note, I want to talk about the idea of meditating or doing spiritual work during significant times like the solstices, the equinoxes, and also the sunrise, the sunset, and the exact time of new moon, quarter moon, and full moon. Well, that's one thing. I mean, doing something at the exact time of the equinox, the solstice, or the moon phase, or the exact time of sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, I mean, some people would say, well, that's not good to obsess about that because then you're turning it into a ritual. And if you turn meditation, which is supposed to help you in every way, into a ritual, then meditation will not become effective and in some cases can be harmful if you really obsess about the ritual. So some would say, no, you shouldn't always obsess about doing your meditations at specific times where the solstice or the equinox happens. Just keep in mind that the energies of the solstice, the equinox, or the full moon, or the eclipse for that matter, last, some people say it's like a 12-hour window around with the exact time, so you don't have to obsess about doing it at the exact time, but at least do it in that 12-hour time frame. But I guess some people would say, no, it's not a ritual. You should always, if possible, try to meditate at the exact time that something happens. So the idea of meditating at the exact times or in a time frame of a significant event, and whether or not meditation can become a harmful ritual if you obsess about that, what do you have to say about that? By the way, we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You never want to give your power away, and this goes back to what I was saying before about always trust your own inner guidance first. This is what's so important about these tools, and again, what I was saying about the mind and government and things, you don't want to give your power away to it. And this goes for the seasons, it goes for the equinoxes, it goes for all this stuff. Anything outside of yourself, anything external, don't give your power away. You do it because you're guided to. You do it because, you are choosing to, not because something else is telling you to do it. And so there are good times, you might say, or they're not even good times as much as they're just times where it might work out more in your favor, but then even that is taking away from it. So it's just you want to work with the energies the best that you can. And if you are going to meditate during a certain time, like a very, like the solstice or whatever, just know that's going to be that type of meditation. It's going to be the solstice type of meditation, but you can meditate at any time. It'll just take on a different flavor, and then how you meditate during that time will, of course, be important. But, you never want to give your power away to anything outside yourself. That's probably the most important thing I've discovered in my spiritual awakening process.
Okay, just so we know, we have 8 minutes and 55 seconds before the live feed goes off, and I think I know just the perfect way to end the show. Retrogrades. We can see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Those are the planets that we can visually see go retrograde. So I guess maybe spend a minute on each of those planets. First of all, what is the significance of a retrograde in general? And then maybe spend about a minute on each of those planets retrograding when we see them in the sky, retrograde.
Yeah, I can actually sum it up a little bit more holistically. Let me talk about the retrograde, and then I'll talk about how you can fit it in. Basically, a retrograde is just a reflective time. It's an internal time. So when a planet's direct, that's a time where, a lot like what we were talking about with forward-moving energy, that's a time where it's more extroverted. You want to take action. It's a lot like that full moon type of energy there. When it's retrograde, this is a time where you can still take action. That's why a lot of times, people, a lot of this mumbo jumbo about Mercury retrograde and not to do anything during Mercury retrograde, that's not true. Mercury retrograde, which is probably what most are familiar with, it's a time where you're supposed to be reflecting on your correspondence or on your ideas, and you're supposed to be treating it as a learning process. So it's not that you don't want to sign contracts. It's just that if you are going to sign a contract during a Mercury retrograde, just double check everything. Really read the fine print. Make sure you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's. And so that's what that period symbolizes, is that it's a period of learning. you're learning, you're redoing, you're really looking at the details. So of course you probably, if you want to be on the safer side of things, don't sign a major contract during a Mercury retrograde, but honestly it doesn't matter so long as you're utilizing, again, the energies for what they're for. So a retrograde is a time of taking the energy of the planet, a lot like basically taking the energy of what I've already discussed about each of the planets and then turning it internal. So, for example, Mercury is now internal thinking. You're now rethinking inside. You're redoing in your mind. It's a good time for drafting, actually. It's a good time for writing down ideas, for thinking about projects. Mars, for instance, is a time about thinking about your goals when he's retrograde. But then when he goes direct, you're supposed to be putting those goals into action and drive. So just to kind of let everyone know, right now we've got only one planet retrograde in terms of a personal planet, and that's Saturn. Saturn's the only retrograde planet. So all the other planets right now are direct, and so, Jupiter, but Jupiter's, actually, no, never mind. Saturn. So this is a time of reflecting on, the structures we're building. But other than that, everything is go time. So it's a lot of extroverted energy, a lot of that positive energy moving forward. We just want to make sure that we're really reflecting on the structures that we're building. But you can tell when a lot of planets are retrograde, when a lot of planets are direct, and it's just a matter of whether it's an internal process or an external process, and that's how you want to approach each of the different types of energies.
All right, cool. We still have a bunch of time left because you summed that up pretty quickly. All right, I guess we'll talk about the whole thing that people are obsessing about the near future. A lot of people are talking about 2017 as being a very significant date. Other people have said 2023 because that's, they say, when Pluto in Capricorn ends, but you're saying no, it's ending later than 2023 because they're using the wrong astrology. So if it's going to be a lot better, some people say that's an even better sign because the best is yet to come, and absence makes the heart grow fonder in that sense. But okay, I'm digressing. About 2017 specifically, I'd like to talk about, because some people say that's going to be a great time of human consciousness expansion. And Ray Kusalanich, I had him on my show. He's talking about how ETs who are watching over us are going to great lengths to make sure that we do have a great consciousness shift in 2017 and go through ascension and all that to enter the fourth dimension and then ultimately the fifth dimension of consciousness. Now, I always caution when I talk about this, I don't want people to take a couch potato attitude towards life because they think that we're going to be saved by ETs and higher vibrations coming in the near future so they don't have to do anything. No, if anything, I hope the fact that I'm telling you this inspires you to get off your ass and work even harder to make the ascension happen even sooner. If you can make it happen sooner than 2017, hallelujah. But okay, I'm digressing again. The point is, 2017, people are obsessing about it. So you have about 3 minutes and 45 seconds left. What do you have to say about this whole 2017 obsession, astrologically speaking, that is?
Yeah, I haven't looked at that particular year in terms of casting a chart for it. But let me go ahead and pull it up while I kind of just talk about this whole Kali Yuga thing, because we are. I mean, as we get closer and closer to this, peak of the Kali Yuga, I mean, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be more and more of this, upward, ascension. And ascension happens, like I was saying, all the time. Every moment, things are changing. And so we can either be going up on that spiral or we can be going down. And by that time, yeah, certainly, I mean, that's going to be a lot of high energy. So what I'm looking at here in the chart here and during that time period, it's totally lining up. Saturn is going to enter Sagittarius at the beginning of 2017 to join up with Pluto. Now, Sagittarius is about ascension. Sagittarius is about raising that frequency up, like I was saying, past the galactic center. So Saturn here means that it becomes a reality. So this is where you actually take your physical structures in life, which includes basically everything that you are and everything material that's made of matter, and raising it up into a frequency and getting serious about ascension and raising your frequency up, because that's what Saturn symbolizes, really putting in that hard work to make it happen. So right now the hard work is with truth and depth, but that's all going to transition into 2017 when Saturn goes over that galactic center and goes into the expansion energies of Sagittarius. Let me see the interesting. Actually, here's another thing, because like I said, I didn't look at 2017, but this is all lining up with what you're saying. Uranus is going into Aries here, right there at the beginning of 2017. So Uranus, a very important planet when it comes to the collective things happening in the world. So Uranus in Aries, this is what freedom is. This is about individuality. This is about breaking free. And what's interesting about this too, in terms of what you're saying, is that Uranus will have finished his transit of Pisces. And so anytime a planet finishes a transit of a particular sign, it's gotten everything it possibly could out of that. So this is a time period where it will, just the early part of 2017 will be the highest point of spiritual freedom for all of us individually, whether we've done that or not and what we've made the most out of it. But then Uranus transitions into Aries this year. So this will be a year of taking that high frequency of spirituality that we've done and then living it, embodying it, because Aries is the sign of life. It's a sign of your physical experiences, what you're actually actively involved with. So that is very interesting, and that can be a time of a lot of freedom, actually, for each individual, but also collectively in terms of what everyone is doing, because Uranus is the collective. That's what it represents in the chart. So in Aries, it means the collective gets very, very fired up, gets very, very active, gets very, very involved. So I think that could definitely be in alignment with raising a frequency and more ascension for sure.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I will bring this interview to an end by telling you the same thing I tell all of my guests. You are a fascinating individual. I have no doubt I could do another show with you, but one of my goals with this show is to get as many different guests on my show as possible before I give any one specific guest double dips, as I feel that is the fairest, most impartial, and ultimately the most informative way of doing a show to expose the nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. So that does mean, Athen, I probably will not be asking you to come on my show again, but that's only because I need to give thousands of other fascinating individuals a chance to have some glory on my show. But this was a fascinating interview indeed, and I will spread this far and wide, upload it to YouTube and everything. And I will definitely be watching your videos in the near future on astrology. I don't obsess about astrology like a lot of people do, but still, you are very interesting to say the least, and your videos are worth watching to plan ahead for the future. Thank you for coming on my show.
Thank you, Andrew. It was my pleasure, and I enjoyed it very much, and thanks for the experience.
Thank you very much for coming on. Take care now. Good luck. Later.
Bye.
Bye. Well, folks, that's the end of this show. Live feed just came off. So next week I will be having Paul Wesley on my show, a native Philadelphian like me. He appeared on Michelle Walling's In5D radio show not that long ago. And I was able to call into that show and talk about a few things. He lived with Mark Passio for a little bit. Mark Passio gave a fascinating presentation at the Free Your Mind 2015 conference that happened this past weekend, which I was at. That was an experience to remember in so many ways. And those videos should be uploaded to YouTube in about 2 months or so. Definitely recommend checking them out. So Paul Wesley on the show next week. We'll talk about the Matrix in general and how to break free from it, and maybe some of Mark Passio's work, since he knew him personally. Maybe he knows his work somewhat. So we'll have Paul Wesley next week. So folks, take care. This is Andrew Fisher signing off from Nature of Reality Radio. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness.